All right, we are back with the man himself. Professor Jim Madden has returned. Oh, dude, you already got the
They came
paperbacks.
today, man. They came today.
Dude, well, okay. Well, I guess the cat is out of the bag. We're going to be talking about this new volume. It's a very good new volume. I haven't read it all, but I've spent a good amount because it's big, and I just got it. But it's a book on really philosophy of mind. It's called Minding the Brain. You're looking at one of the contributors there, obviously the most handsome contributor, Professor Madden. And give us a little background of this project, Jim. I don't know when this episode airs, if they'll hear the other podcast. I am doing a couple episodes with some of the other contributors. I don't know how it will all line up, but anyways, just give us the background. How'd you get involved in this? What is it
What
about?
which contributors are you doing the show with?
I think it is. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but Dr. Angus.
Manoj, I think.
Is it
Yeah,
Manouge?
I think so.
I think Bob as well. Bob Marks. He's been on the show before, and I think Kraus. Is that
Yeah,
the other
Ross
editor?
is one of
Yeah,
the editors. Yeah,
right.
nice.
So there we go. Yeah, it'll be
Yeah,
Brian
so
Kraus.
I can't remember if I was contacted by Angus or Robert Kraus to do it. I think it was Angus, but so okay, so I've had kind of like one order removed from Angus Manouge for a while. In that he he is professor of philosophy for a long time at Concordia University in Wisconsin, in Mequon, right? Just
Oh,
north.
really?
Yeah,
Not too
where,
far from here.
where I have the distinction of having been kicked out of my freshman year of college, right? And so, right, and so there was a
That's why you're the
yes,
maverick philosopher. You're the
yeah.
bad boy.
I had exceptionally good grades, but I remember the woman who was sort of like the dean of students then, very good woman. You know, I remember her saying to me on my way out, like, Jim, I think someday you're going to be like a decent person, but we're not going to wait for you here at Concordia University to figure that out, right? So
What a great line.
yeah, it's a great line, yeah. And I was able to contact her later in life and like and say thank you. You're I think it worked out, and
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, man.
you really gave me much by this reminder, right? Okay,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
so yes, so but Manoj, he wasn't there when I was there, but there was a guy who I had like a world civ class with, but we read a bunch of classic stuff. Like I read, like the first one I read Plato was in this like world civ class. Okay, and that really partly turned me on to philosophy. This guy named I think he went by Reverend Ferry at the time. I think he became Dr. Ferry, and he eventually was like the longtime president
Hmm.
of yeah. And so obviously he and Manoj were friends, and like this is someone who's like actually important to me in my development. Yeah, and so anyway, I had contact with Angus Manoj a couple times throughout the career, and then when I heard he was editing this volume and they wanted me to do it, I was like, yeah, by all means, I'll throw something in. And I had this like giant paper on hylomorphism that I wanted to be like my last statement on hylomorphism before moving on to other stuff. Kind of already chambered. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it because it was very big and like probably too big for a journal, but big enough for an anthology, right?
Right. So
Yeah,
perfect. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah. So perfect. So I was like, boom. I didn't know it was like the Discovery Institute or anything like that
Hmm.
when I signed up for it, right? I just knew Angus was doing this. As a guy I knew, guy I respected. We had mutual friends, so it was
Yeah.
like,
Hmm.
yeah. So I don't know much about the history of it, like where it came from, like what moved them to put it together. I just got the email saying, "Would you happen to have something on the hylomorphism, son?" And I was like, "It's funny you asked,
I
right?
got just the thing.
Yeah, I've just got a thing for you, yeah."
Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, so that's all I know about where the volume came from. And I'll say this, it's an impressive volume. Like this is the first time I've seen the whole thing.
Yeah, dude. I was impressed.
Yeah, the coverage on this is pretty interesting. I think, I think we could talk about I don't see it as necessarily as like a really good, primer on philosophy of mind. Okay. But it's like,
Manouge's contribution would be a nice thing
yeah,
to like assign to
yeah.
like
Yeah, maybe like that essays. And his book, by the way, he has a book called I want to call it Agents Under Fire that came
yeah.
out early 2000s. It's a superb book. So I remember,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Haven't read that one.
I remember reading it in the early 2000s. I was a fairly junior professor, and it was like one of my, I kind of like always wanted to get back into philosophy of mind, right? And it was one of the early things I read that kind of really got me going
Yeah.
back in the direction. But what I do see is like if you want like a overall like anti-materialist case, or a case that's showing you don't have to be a materialist to be someone who's like taking on the science in a constructive way. I think this is very good, right? We look
Yeah.
at just full coverage of it and people that have doing it. So
Yeah, and like I said, I haven't had time to read all the contributions,
yeah,
but there's a lot of representation in there. Obviously, you have people defending a kind of substance dualist perspective. You are making the case for making sense of hylomorphism. There's some
yeah,
idealists, I believe, in there. But then you also see like specific arguments just for specific commitments. Like there's a development of James Ross's argument in there,
yeah.
actually, which, as you know, is one of I think one of the more creative and provocative and I think convincing
Who wrote that one?
people I have never heard of before. It's two authors. If you wouldn't mind looking it up real quick, because I was not familiar with either of them. And
Let's see here.
Selmer, oh, I'm going to pronounce this horribly wrong. Selmer Brinsjord and Naveen Govindarayulu. That cannot be the correct
What's the name of the
pronunciation.
paper? Oh, there, yeah.
It's mathematical objects are non-physical, so we are too. It'd be chapter 23, and that is so it doesn't. James Ross is in the title, but it is
Yeah.
James Ross's argument developed. Yeah,
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know them either. That's cool. I'll be having a look at that paper.
yeah, it's cool. It's cool. And of course, I'm partial to a lot of James Ross's stuff anyway, so I'm obviously going to lean towards that. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about what you contributed to this volume.
Yeah.
Now, look, we'll keep it basic because I want people to actually go and read it. But also, I know it's been a while since you've written it, so it's probably not totally fresh in your memory. And I know how hard it is to kind of like dust the cobwebs off of something you wrote. Probably like a year or two ago at this point.
Yeah,
but
right.
give us
Well,
some highlights. Give us a sketch. Yeah.
I think the first draft of that thing I did is I had this joint, kind of a, not tit for tat, but it's a kind of a joint thing that they had me do with Mark Johnson at Princeton.
Mm.
And I wrote up this like big like 35, 40 page paper to get ready for that. And then I found out after the fact, I was only going to have about 25 minutes to speak. So I had to like put that aside. And that's the origin of this paper. It was like,
Oh, cool. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, so I call it mere hylomorphism, right? Is the title of it. And this comes from a period where like I had kind of realized like relatively like late in life, mid-career, that I really wasn't that well educated of a human being, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I really came to worry that a lot of what I had done with a lot of classical philosophy had just been this sort of Thomistic cherry picking. Right. Okay. And then even what I was doing with maybe even Thomism was a kind of like comfortable cherry picking. Right. And I realized that how well did I really understand like the classic version of hylomorphism, like what you find.
Right.
And we've talked about this, but I sort of started over, like really like started over. Okay. And like went back and got really into De Anima and really into how it connects to the metaphysics and really into how it connects to Nicomachean ethics, and didn't worry. I didn't worry. How does it connect with like creedal Catholicism, right? How does it connect with certain versions of Thomism? I just left, and I still just like put all that aside. Like I just want to understand this and how it's work. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, and I think when I'm looking back on like Mind, Matter, and Nature, like the first book I wrote on this, I think I was in a lot of ways still kind of trying to get a square peg in a round hole, maybe cherry picking some stuff. And, I think that book still holds up for what it's supposed to be. I still think it's a very good book. If you wanted to be a Thomist in light of contemporary philosophy of mind, this may well be the best way to do it. Okay. So,
yeah.
But the question of whether or not that is hylomorphism and that is like, gives us the full strength of hylomorphism, I'm more open to that. The answer to that could be negative. And this paper is me trying to figure some of that out. Right.
Yeah. What an honest disposition. Right.
Yeah. You know me, right? I'm not a proud man, Pat, right? Right. Probably frustrating yourself for some people.
I was talking about this actually yesterday, Jim. I was talking about with another Jim. I was talking about with another Dr. Jim. We had Dr. Jim. We had Dr. Jim Jacobs on the show, and I brought up the fact that like, hey, Aristotle's ethics, properly understood, it's not even really all that close to a Christian ethic. Really, not really. Yeah. Like the attempt to sort of Christianize the dude or Christianize the Aristotelian picture is, I think, very contrived, and we shouldn't do that. We should just acknowledge the commonalities where there actually are commonalities, and we should also just accept the radical divergence. And there's a lot of radical divergence, and I think the divergence actually is quite good.
Yeah.
For the Christian, because I think that Aristotle's ethics is severely deficient in some ways,
Yeah.
right? It's sort of like the good life is like something that happens to only 3 people that are in an aristocracy, more or less, right? Everyone else is kind of screwed.
Or like, or like you've got the good life for those 3 people, then you have the good life for the rest of the slaves, right?
Yeah, yeah, right. It's yeah,
That's the thing.
right, and that's like kind of jarring. And yeah, hey, maybe that's right, but I don't think that there's not really an Aristotelian optimism there. You know what I mean? Um, of course not. He was explicitly pessimistic sometimes. All to say, I agree with you, Jim.
Yeah.
I agree with you in general, but you're obviously looking at this more in philosophy, not even philosophy of mind, but really philosophy of nature, and that's sort of how you initially framed this paper,
Yeah.
which I love. Is you're like, hey, let's just back up from issues in philosophy of mind right now and just kind of understand like what motivates Hylomorphism in the first place, because it's not the interaction problem, for
Yeah.
example, right? And I think that positioning is hugely important. So if you wouldn't mind,
Very
talk
important.
to
Yeah.
us about it.
And
Yeah,
and that's something I was claiming back in the first book too. It's like,
yeah,
look, like the thing to remember here is hylomorphism, and what I mean by mere hylomorphism is a hylomorphism that, I'm not a classicist, so it could be misreading the animal and all that, right? But like, it's a hylomorphism that we can actually connect to Aristotle, right?
yeah.
That still, like gives, like, that's the mere part, right? But still is like, going to give us a view of things that we might be able to take seriously today, right?
Yes, good. Mm-hmm.
And I think if you're going to say your hylomorphism connects with Aristotle, then you have to say it comes online. Its main motivation is the problem of change as it appears in the physics, right?
Yes.
That
Yeah.
is it. Okay.
Undeniably so.
Undeniably. Yeah. And we can get into like, whether the order of the books really is the order of thinking for Aristotle, but whatever. Right. Okay. So, and for Aristotle, he's, and this, I do like riff on Mark Johnston in the paper on this quite a bit, is, the idea is if just taking any ordinary artifact like a desk, like, okay, that desk is not identical to its parts, right? How do we know that? Because you could go Jimi Hendrix on that desk like on a guitar, right? And like smash that thing up and you have all the parts, but you wouldn't have the desk. Okay. Yeah. So it's not identical to the parts, right? And moreover, we could change over piecemeal, one piece at a time of the desk over time. And at no point would you say, aha, you stole my desk, right? You would say the thing is got some sort of relation to the outside so it can exchange parts, and thereby it remains a desk, but it's not identical to any one collection of parts, right?
Yes, right.
And this is, if you go into physics book 2, right, these are the arguments he makes about, what is the nature of a thing, right? Okay, it's not its matter, it's not its parts, as I put it in the paper. That's how I frame the paper. It's not its parts. It's got to be something else, right? Or it's got to be the parts in composition with something else. Okay.
Yes.
But I think where we make a mistake, and we all make this mistake, and like I think the English language lends itself to this mistake, right? Is when I say it's the parts plus something else, we immediately think of it's another part.
So, yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Right. There's like a special screw that goes in that desk that makes it a single desk, right? Mm-hmm. That is what it is, right? Or maybe it's a screw that you can't see.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the deal. If the whole point is like, how do we make sense of parts making a whole, a unity, right? Where the parts aren't sufficient for the unity, adding another discrete part to it is not going to do that.
Yes, right? Obviously not. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's important. So, but right there though, we've got to go with Aristotle and say being is said in many ways. And I think we misunderstand hylomorphism when we think of everything that's going to enter on our ontology now is a discrete, countable, right? Concrete individual thing. Okay. Because that's not what a form is for Aristotle. It is not what a form is, right? Mm-hmm. And so, Aristotle will tell you, what is it that you need in addition to the parts for the desk is you need an arrangement such that the desk does something, right, that we would not ascribe merely to its parts.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so for an artifact like a desk, it's going to be like, it's got to have now restability, right? Mm-hmm. I can set my mug on it, right? Okay. And so you see the point here is, but that's where the matter form distinction gets made. Okay. Mm-hmm. And all the matter form, so what is the form of the desk? It's being ready to have things set on it, right? Mm-hmm. That's what the form of the desk is, right? It's ready for things to be set upon it. That's the form, right? So when you have parts arranged such that they have ready to accept resting things. Okay, it's a desk. All right. And all the soul matter, and I don't like soul body distinction in Aristotle. I'd rather put it soul matter distinction
Yeah.
is the application of that to living things.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yep.
Okay. And so trigger alert for cat lovers coming up here. Okay. So
it's going to get a little gruesome. Right.
You've probably heard me use the example, but if you take a cat and you throw it through a wood chipper, okay, it will become brutally obvious that the cat is not identical to simply the collection of its parts, right? Because you'll have all the stuff on the far side of the wood chipper, but you won't have the cat.
But no more Fluffy, right?
No more Fluffy. Fluffy's gone, right? And also Fluffy's metabolic, right? So Fluffy's always exchanging parts with his environment. So he's not identical parts. So what is Fluffy? Fluffy is a matter. Aristotle will call it soul, but the soul is simply the form of a living thing. Okay. And the way Aristotle defines soul in De Anima, when you finally get him to settle down in Book 2 of De Anima and like give you this definition, he says it is the first actualization under Reeves' translation, the first actualization of a living body. Okay? It's very important because like a lot of us later will try to make that the first actualizer. That's not what Aristotle says, at least according to Reeves, right? It's the first actualization. So it's not like this form is this thing that comes up to some parts and like does this actual,
and then like does his magic on it, right?
Does its magic on it, right? And his example in De Anima is if eyes were living organisms on their own, their soul would be sight.
Yeah.
Okay. He says it's not seen because when you close your eyes, you're not seen, but they're still such that they are sighted. They're ready to go.
Yes. Right.
They're ready to do the eye thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And that's important. So so it's not like the soul of the eye then is something acting on the matter. It is the matter's readiness to do the eye business.
Yes, right. Okay. Good. Subtle, but good distinction.
Subtle, yeah, but good. But now note that means like Fluffy is an interesting thing because he's not identical to his parts now. Like, Aristotle's not a dualist about anything, but he's not a materialist about anything either.
Yeah, and this is one of the themes of your paper, and I think it's right. It's like, because hylomorphism gets accused of both. It's like, oh, you guys are really just dualists, right? Or no, you guys are really just materialists. And part of your very careful project here is to show why neither of those are actually correct representations of the view.
As Mark Johnston put it to me in conversation, it was like the risk is either becoming just interactive dualism or a polite version of materialism.
Yeah, polite materialism.
I like that idea, polite materialism with good taste. Right? Right?
Is there such a thing? sorry to all my materialist friends, but right. Just be like me. Like I accept that I'm a crude brute. There's no such thing as a polite pat friend. That's okay, right? Yeah.
And anyway, and so like Aristotle even used the example. He says, look, if you smush the eye back to the eye jelly, his example, right?
Yep.
You don't have sight anymore. The soul of the eye is done, right? If he says, if a hammer or if an axe were an organism, its soul would be its readiness to chop. And if you smash up the axe to bits, the readiness is gone, right?
Yeah.
This is Aristotle like really pressing to say he does not think souls are discrete individuals, right? In the way that the things they are souls of are discrete individuals. I think that's very, very important, right? And so that's one thing I really wanted to get out in this paper first is what is meant by soul there. It's like when we even given modern English to call soul in Aristotle's soul is a kind of an equivocation, right? Like given what people expect.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Right.
Right.
I mean, people just think like in contemporary, I guess, common language speak, people identify soul and mind a lot of times. Right. And and that triggers Jim. You start doing that. Oh man, you want to set Jim off.
Set me off. Right. Because look, there's things without minds, right? Like for Aristotle, trees got a soul. Is it a living thing? Yeah. Is it a living thing identical with its parts? The only living thing that is like, doesn't have this problem for him, Aristotle, is the God.
Right? It's the God, right? Yeah.
God, yeah. And so the tree is not identical to its parts. So it does stuff on its own, right? So it's got a soul, all right. But it doesn't have a mind in Aristotle's view, right?
Yeah.
You see that. Okay, that's another thing too we should know too, is like Aristotle will make a case for soul why does he distinguish between the substantial or the form of an accidental object like a desk and a soul in something like a cat, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what Aristotle will argue is like the desk is entirely passive in its function, right? It's just sitting there waiting for things to be set upon it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the only changes it's undergoing independently are simply the changes that would have undergone the wood or the screws composing it anyway.
Yeah.
So all the desk really does, outside of just waiting to be set upon, is it is decomposing in the way wood decomposes, in the way metal decomposes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So it doesn't have any active powers over and above the powers of its parts. So he'll say a desk is an accidental being. It's really just an accident of its composing parts.
Yes. Right. Uh-huh.
It's got a kind of temporary unity because, you know, we can do things with it, but he admits it's all relative to our interests and stuff like that.
For sure.
Its principle is not internal to it. It's externally imposed.
Right. And hence why it's an artifact. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But then like the cat, right, the tree, he would say the elements, right, they have a thing they do that is not imposed on them by anything outside of them, right? So the cat, like you get the emergence of powers in the cat that are not present in any sense.
Yeah, like novel systems level properties.
Yeah,
right.
And Aristotle's not saying it's mysterious how you get those out of that. That's not his point. But he's just saying cats reproduce, cats hunt, you know, cats make me sneeze, all this stuff, right? That their parts alone would not do. It's an emergent feature of the cat, and thereby the cat is something over and above the parts in a more robust sense than which the desk is.
Than the desk, right?
It has a soul. That's what it is to be alive for him.
Yes,
is to like have this sort of like power over your own parts.
Right. Yeah. And of course, these like that. I mean, that's an obvious distinction. I think it's obvious. There's certainly borderline cases, right? Everybody likes to talk about styrofoam. That's what keeps me up at night, right? right. But like when it comes to a cat and a desk, like it totally makes sense to have different classifications for these things, precisely because of those sort of higher systems, emergent systems level properties, right? Yeah.
Okay, and then something else really important for this paper for me is so what is it that the cat has to be ready to do, right? In order for us to say like you've got a living cat, which is to say you've got a cat soul going on there, right? And I like to put it that way, like you've got soul going on. It's like a soul is in the dude.
Dude, sounds like I don't know, an album, right?
Well, it sounds like a Motown album from like 1969, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah,
that's soul going on.
Right? I was laughing the other day because guess what just popped into my head? Bad Leroy Brown, man. Just walking around.
That's right. Yeah.
Dang it, Jim. This is what I have to deal with now.
I'm doing what I've done to you, man. Right? Yeah. Oh man, if you get that in the docket for the band, I'm coming.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, we'll put it right on the set list. Right?
That's right. Anyway.
Continue, yeah. Just remember, listeners, you get what you pay for with this podcast.
Yeah. Right. So I'm trying to bring this back now. It's center. Right. Anyway. So
you got soul going on. That's what started.
Is for Aristotle, there's no defining what the soul of cat is outside of like defining the point of flourishing for a cat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So like the notion of cat happiness and the notion of cat soul are like conceptually linked. Okay. And so what is it to be an actualized cat? It's to be disposed towards a certain point of cat flourishing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
A good life for the cat. Right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so what is it to have a human soul? It's to be disposed toward the good life of a human being. Like, you know, and I think even like, you know, like if you look at the whole structure of the organism, it's all set up, right, to get that thing into like the good life of that kind of animal, right? And even post-Darwin, you can even say, well, the good life for it is just to make more of its own kind or something like that. Fine, but you're going to say like it's still this. Like to be a cat is to be disposed in that way, right? Okay, and so once again, you're seeing the connection. You're like, if you want to talk soul for Aristotle, you got to talk ethics now. Right.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna have to bring in what is happiness. You see that?
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And also like a lot of that stuff, I bring this all in the paper, is you're not going to get any of that to work unless you bring in the act potency sections from the metaphysics too. Okay.
Yeah, right.
All right. And so then you look at the human soul. Okay. So what's the human soul? What is it to have a human soul? Well, it is to be an organism, right? That is configured in a way so that you're at the ready to do the human thing, right? You're, humans, I'm loose here, I'm ready to go, right? Just put in the right situation and boom, right? That's how he thinks. You're like, if you're in the right situation, you'll trigger it, right? Because it's the
Right.
spring.
Yeah.
And okay, so what's the human thing? Well, we've got all the bodily, the vegetative stuff that the plants have. We got the bodily stuff that the cats have, or the sensate stuff the cats have. But also then we have this rational function, right? And Aristotle's quite impressed by that, right? And he thinks that, to say the least, that he thinks that rational function, when fully exercised, when actively exercised, only makes sense in as much as it is like gained a sort of identity relationship with the God.
Well, yeah, right.
Yeah, okay. And in that sense, he would say like the soul, the life of the human is in fact, in a sense, separable from bodily life. Because it's an involvement with something that is itself utterly separated from bodily life, the God. Right? The one non-bodily thing for Aristotle, fully non-bodily, is the God. And Aristotle thinks in as much as we are capable of this sort of rest in contemplation, right, we have a non-bodily state, which then puts us in some sort of, I think he's really saying, some kind of identity relation with the God. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then how you make sense of that aspect of our lives in coherence with the other aspects of our lives, I don't know that anyone can make sense of that. And if you read Aristotle's writings in his attempts to make sense of it, it's the thing he has the least to say about. Like if you get to De Anima, like literally where he talks about separated intellect, it is a paragraph or two, depending on how the translation breaks it up. And it's like, it's a half page. Right? That's all you get. Because I think Aristotle is saying, I'm out of things to say about this.
That's it, boys.
Yeah. Because he says all over the De Anima, he says, soul is not separable from matter. Soul is not separated from matter. Soul is not separated from matter. It's not, guys, it's not separable. And then he starts saying, well, unless there's a function of the soul that the life, this thing has a part of its life that is non-bodily. Yeah. And maybe that's reason. But then he's like, yeah, but it seems like for us to do reason, we got to have imagination. You know what I mean? And so he has these hedges throughout. And then he's like, yeah, it looks like that active intellect business is doing that. But then you get, he says some very obscure things about it. He says we don't remember it. And then he goes to the next thing. Right?
Right.
Okay. And I find myself I actually like that. Okay. And I find myself very compelled by a paper that Elizabeth Anscombe wrote about this. She says, yeah, it seems like she says, I agree that there is no bodily organ of thought. Okay. But that doesn't mean there's a non-bodily organ of thought. Yeah. It might be that thought is just the sort of thing that you cannot identify with being identical to anything. And when we start to think about thinking, we've just run out of things that can be said. You see that. And like for Anscombe, like that's as good as you're going to get. Right. Because she is a very consistent Aristotelian on this. Right. And
she's great. Yeah. I love her on.
Yeah. And I think that's where I've sort of finally landed on this.
Yeah, that's cool. Jim, that was great, man. I'm totally satisfied. Is that the sort of introduction to hylomorphism? And obviously there's a lot more in the paper. You do talk about relations to contemporary neuroscience, but people can read the paper for
some other very odd things that Aristotle says I think it's in the Metaphysics, the passage I use here, about how he thinks you can like locate the primary place of the soul in the body, right? Just pretty funky.
Yeah, good stuff, man. All right, let's hold the book up one more time so people can see it. I want to encourage them to grab a copy of that. If you guys are interested in philosophy of mind, I really do highly recommend this book. It's called Minding the Brain. It's already out. It's officially released. You can find it at the usual places, Amazon and whatnot. I'm very impressed with what I've read so far. It's great to see Jim contributing in another volume. If you guys haven't read any of Jim's published work, I mean, that's insulting. Right. Frankly. So go do that. Right.
It would be good for the listeners to go read something where I'm not just completely screwing around.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Yeah.
you are a pro and you do really
Yeah.
great work, and I want to make sure
Thank you.
people get to benefit from that. So, yeah, as goofy as we are here, I've always benefited from a lot of your work,
Thank you.
and I appreciate what you do, really. So,
Yeah, and I'm proud of that paper. I'll say that. I don't.
yeah,
Maybe I shouldn't say it, but I am proud of that paper. I'm not saying it's the end all be all, but it's a paper where you're going to get Robert Brandom and Aristotle, right?
yeah,
And like even some Merleau-Ponty stuff in the same conversation, along with neuroscience. So like it's a good representative of where I've kind of landed a lot of things. So,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. All right, gentle listeners, check it out. Give us your thoughts and comments below. Please like and subscribe to the podcast. We'll get you next time. See ya.